boat going by the window. I have the screens down, but anyway, welcome to another episode of the Beach Report. Oh my gosh, I don't think, I'm gonna have to shut this off. No, it's okay. So just waiting for some people to come on before I turn the cameras. Hi, Jasmine. I'm so happy to see you. Always to see a friendly face. I know the chat was brutal this morning, and I do wish that people would think about the fact that there are teenagers in the chat. So yeah, you're first, Jasmine. Hi, John. You guys over in the UK, what are you doing? It's dinner time, right? That's why all my England people are on first. Hi, Lappy. Now the Pittsburgh people are here. Okay, I get it. Timing is everything, isn't it? So we've got a pretty gray, sullen day here in Fort Lauderdale. Nothing to see here. Hello, wait, who is that? Cleo. Hi, Cleo. Yes, Donna thinks I should get glasses as readers or something because she says I've been squinting a lot trying to read the comments. She's not wrong. Anyway, hi, solar eclipse. Hi, everybody. Yes, it's tea time. Oh, okay. I love that. I want some tea. Oh my gosh. I would love to have some good English tea. You know, the tea that we drink here in America is crap. It's so bad. Lappy, I bought my first pair of reading glasses yesterday at Walmart right off the shelf. Oh boy, yeah. You say it stinks getting old, but I have to disagree, Lappy. I am so enjoying old age. I am. I think it's like the greatest thing ever that I'm 60. I love it so much. Let's get with the program here, you know? I mean, better than the alternative. A lot of people never make it to their 60s and their 70s and their 80s. And at this point, it's kind of a crapshoot, you know? No, it's not. You can also control your destiny and your future with your health, because your health is your wealth. And I'm incredibly healthy. Being older is a number. Exactly, John. But it's a good number. You know, it's you can't discount the number because the amount of years that you've lived, it does say something about you and what you know about life and what your experience is. And, you know, we've got Jasmine is only 13 years old and she kind of just got here, you know, so it's up to us to help lead her in the right direction because people need to be taught in a good way, you know. They can also be led in a bad way, which I don't want, but Jasmine's doing exactly the right thing because her parents have taught her to think about God as a parental force in her life too. Jasmine often quotes Bible verses, and we love that. Oh, there you go, Lappy. That didn't sound right. But anyway, yeah. Yes, Lappy, I will rub off on you. And I want people to be more positive and more excited about life. I think that's why the young people get angry when they see me on camera and they think I'm old and they want to say derogatory things about my skin and whatever. Because, yeah, I got wrinkles. You know what? I earned every single wrinkle. Earned them all. Proud of them. So, yes, thank you. I love this sweatshirt, right? Let's go ice. All right, well, we've got enough people on, so I'd like to get started. Today's show is going to be kind of, I'm a journalist, by the way, a real card-carrying journalist. Went to journalism school, wrote for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette for many, many years, and You're nice. Thank you. Oh, you're sweet. But I am proud. I'm proudly 60 years old. I am a proud Gen Xer. I am one of the first. Hi, Gob. Oh, you guys, everybody say hi to Gob. Gob, you're brand new, aren't you? I think I just saw you today for the first time in the chat. And you are a former liberal who woke up. I love it. I love that you're here, Gob. You're 60 as well. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I thought you were 12. Okay, then. Well, that's kind of crazy, but you know, I don't know too many 12-year-olds with wrinkles like mine. I would hope not. But anyway, everybody say welcome to Gob, because Gob is finally understands what we've been talking about. And you know what? I think it is a great person who can have these wrong ideas, and you know, you got them because you were brainwashed and you listened to people who did not have your best interest at heart, and you believed lies. And now you're over here. Oh, you're not a liberal. I thought you used to be a liberal. Didn't just I'm sorry if I have you wrong, but I thought I saw somebody who used to be a Democrat, maybe. I don't know about liberal. But anyway, if I have it wrong, I'm sorry. But I saw some people on today who were saying that. So I think that, you know what, 30 years ago, I'm still glad that you changed your mind. You grew up, didn't you? That's what happens in 30 years. Oh, you think these are dentures, huh? I love it when people come in the comments and they say things like that, because I can prove they're not. Would you like me to? How many people buy dentures with one missing? Nobody. Okay, so let's establish right here, Jill doesn't wear dentures. There's nothing fake about me. Not anything. I'm wearing lipstick, and that's the only makeup I'm wearing right now. So say what you want about me, but I am 100% 60-year-old woman standing in front of you. And you know what? If I had dentures, that wouldn't be very nice to comment on them, would it now? Because every one of us is just another broken tooth away from getting dentures. So try not to be so judgmental of other people and say stuff to people like that. You know, would you walk up to someone on the street you don't know and be like, hey, nice dentures? That's rude. I do have very beautiful teeth, and I've had them my whole life. I guess since I was 10 or whatever, when I stopped losing teeth. And they have served me well. And now they're starting to fall out. Yeah, because I have bruxism and I grind my teeth. So it's a problem. If you grind your teeth, please, for the love of all that is holy, get a tooth guard. It's like just a piece of plastic, a $500 piece of plastic, but it will help you. Anyway. Sorry. Did I ever go clubbing back in 82? Well, in 82, I was only 17 years old. No, 16 years old, actually. And no, well, okay. That's not true. There was an under 21 club that I liked to go to when I was 16 in Pittsburgh. That was a lot of fun. What was it called? Lappy, what was it called? It was on Route 8. It was so much fun. That was where I learned to love disco music. Lappy, you know, you're from Pittsburgh. Do you remember? I can tell this is a Democrat. Who's a Democrat? I hope they're, I don't know. Nobody's a Democrat on this show that is friendly towards me anyway. Yeah, we're kind of tired of the Democrats. Okay, so before I just start chatting to you guys, which I love to do, but seriously, this is very serious today. So there is a hearing in Minnesota right now when public funds are abused, addressing fraud and the taxpayer dollars. You went to clubs in Hollywood, and were you old enough to be in those clubs, Cobb? Because didn't you say you're 60? Anyway, we are going to watch these hearings right now. I might go from hearing to hearing because there are a bunch of very interesting hearings going on today. On this, this is Wednesday, right? Wednesday, January 21st. my little sister's birthday. Happy birthday, Jamie. You will see us actually on Saturday. I'm taking my little sister out to see one of our favorite bands, which is Smokin' Renegades, which I did a show on last weekend. So we'll be with Smokin' Renegades again on Saturday for Jamie's birthday. So I hope you guys will join us then. Okay, well, anyway, let's get to work here. Let's listen to these hearings because it's really important. I'm going to pull the camera up. Okay. And you guys know I'm doing this on a shoestring budget. I'm a real journalist covering real journalism. And that's Cosmo. I know, Cosmo, I know. It's okay. It's okay, sweetheart. You want to be on the show?
Power on.
All right, it's fine, Cosmo. You don't need to tell us. All right. See if we get some sound. Oh, there's our hero, Nick Shirley. Okay. So this is actually live, but we're coming in about 10, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour late.
Participate and watch and participate orderly. But our hearing is on fraud and theft of taxpayer dollars. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Lee, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, what is with this lady with this guy? Oh my gosh. Did you see that? That's some weirdness. Who are those people? Why did she pull him like that? Did you see that? I don't know what a thumb out policy is.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Today's hearing will examine the widespread and outrageous amount of fraud taking place in and around Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minnesota has lost billions of dollars in state-administered and federally funded programs due to organized fraud. Fraud networks operating in Minnesota dating back more than a decade have submitted over $9 billion, that's a billion with B, in false claims. Some high-profile cases in Minnesota include organizations and programs such as Feeding Our Future, Early Intensive Developmental and Behavioral Intervention, Housing Stabilization Services, and Integrated Community Supports. Now we're going to watch a video.
Did you guys hear he called it organized fraud?
It's welfare fraud. It's all about the daycare.
They estimate as much as $100 million a year is being stolen by shady daycare center operators.
So how much money are we talking about stolen from the American taxpayer?
Well in excess of $1 billion.
Ripping off state-run programs intended to feed low-income kids, house the disabled, and provide services to autistic children.
Where are the children at?
All right, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to go through all of this because we all know all of this, okay? I want to hear what they have to say. I think it's been well established that the Somalian community was brought to Minnesota in order to perpetrate fraud. I think that's the reason why they're here. I mean, why else? Why else would you inject a third world country into Minnesota? It's so strange, and I think we all need to know what the answers are to this one. So I'm going to forward through this Nick Shirley stuff because we do know about it. And let's see what these people have to say for themselves. Here's Daniel to tell us exactly how the fraudsters work. They call people racist. They blame us for their fraud. It doesn't work, Daniel. You call us racist and we know you are a fraudster. We know exactly who you are. You show us every time. All righty then, let's go.
And deliver health care to Medicaid recipients. Since 2021, the DOJ has charged 98 defendants in Minnesota-based fraud cases, 85 of whom are of Somali descent. Of the 98 defendants,
85 of whom are Somali descent. You're making an assumption about these poor people from another country because they're brown. No, I'm not. I'm making an assumption about criminals who come to my country and steal on behalf of politicians. That's what I'm making an assumption about. You want to challenge me on it? Good, let's go. Here we go. Let's listen to this whole hearing. And we'll see who's a racist and who's a fraudster. You use racism as a way to get away with your crimes.
Minnesota-based fraud cases, 85 of whom are of Somali descent. Of the 98 defendants, 64 have been convicted. DOJ has now undertaken extensive investigative action, which includes issuing over 1,750 subpoenas, executing more than 130 search warrants, and conducting more than 1,000 witness interviews. Since the start of the Trump administration, the federal response to fraud in Minnesota has intensified, following a series of high-profile cases involving state-administered, federally funded programs. One of the initial instances of high-profile fraud in the state involved the nonprofit Feeding Our Future, which was at the center of a $250 million COVID-19 related fraud scheme. As part of the scheme, fraudsters exploited Department of Agriculture, USDA food programs designed to provide meals for children. Federal prosecutors ultimately convicted 57 defendants and described the scheme as the nation's largest COVID-era fraud. The issue gained renewed national attention in late December 2025, following a widely shared YouTube video posted by one of our witnesses, Mr. Nick Shirley. Mr. Shirley's work highlighted suspected fraud in Minnesota child care programs. His reporting prompted federal authorities to intensify investigations, expand oversight, and coordinate multi-agency enforcement efforts. A week ago today, Mr. Shirley released a second video that documented alleged fraud in the transportation industry intended to provide rides for children, the disabled, and the elderly. Mr. Shirley uncovered companies with questionable addresses and vehicles intended to transport children, the disabled, and the elderly that remained idle for extended periods of time. We look forward to hearing from Mr. Shirley about what he was able to uncover. But how did we get here? Hopefully another witness, Scott Dexter, a former fraud investigator for the Minnesota Department of Human Services, can shed some light on that for us. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that this massive wave of fraudulent activity didn't just have the consequence of ripping off taxpayers. It has drastically impacted legitimate organizations that are truly helping their neighbors. Jennifer Larson is here today to share her story about how this massive fraud has crippled her organization that serves autistic children. We'd like to think that these fraudsters will one day face justice, but it appears that is not always the case. For example, Yasmin Ali, a daycare and home health care owner charged with stealing millions from Minnesota taxpayers, after being granted bail, disappeared before a trial and has not been located since. That was more than a decade ago. The tentacles of this fraud ring are widespread and include crimes other than fraud. For example, the aforementioned Yasmin Ali. Her brother, Adaris Abdullah Ali, pleaded guilty in 2009 to lying to a federal grand jury about his knowledge of a group of young Somali men in Minneapolis who traveled to Somalia to fight with Al-Shabaab, a foreign terrorist organization against the transitional federal government of Somalia. We can also consider the fact that at least $700 million in U.S. cash transported via passenger luggage through Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. The incidents are all currently under federal investigation, with the majority carried by couriers traveling to Somalia, other African nations, and the Middle East. While no definitive links to funding terrorism have been established yet, we know that hundreds of millions of dollars in cash are being transported to areas where foreign terrorist organizations are active. What could possibly go wrong? A whistleblower has alleged that TSA personnel at MSP, Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, repeatedly identified and flagged routine encounters with Somali men carrying large suitcases filled with bundled cash, often exceeding $1 million. During an interview, a former TSA agent at MSP from 2016 to 2021, now a whistleblower, Liz Jackson, noted that she saw, quote, suitcases packed with millions of dollars in cash moving through MSP again and again, carried by the same type of couriers, which raised questions that she feels law enforcement and political leaders still haven't answered, close quote. Jackson further explained her repeated encounters with Somali men carrying suitcases packed with cash, and in one case, a bag filled with new passports. According to JAXA, the volume, consistency, and profile of the transactions she witnessed
rid of you.
were well beyond ordinary or everyday behavior. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has noted that the department is currently investigating where Minnesota's taxpayer dollars are being placed. Additional reports show that Somali individuals in the United States send roughly $215 million abroad each year. On January 9th, Secretary Bessent indicated that the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, informed 4 money transfer organizations that they're under investigation for their roles in the fraud scheme involving the theft of funds from social services in Minnesota. He also indicated that some banks in Minnesota are being investigated by the Internal Revenue Service's Civil Enforcement Division for allegations related to money laundering. As you can see, there's much to unpack surrounding these numerous fraud schemes taking place in and around Minneapolis, Minnesota. I would be remiss if I didn't suggest and urge additional investigation throughout this entire country. I know that in my home state of Arizona, our Democrat Attorney General came in to office and quickly said that there had been $2.5 million in fraud just in the Medicaid program alone. And in recent studies released over the last year in Arizona, it's been suggested that as much as $7.2 billion in fraud annually take place in Arizona's similar programs. So this is not just a Minnesota issue, but it just happens to be at the forefront of why we're here today. I look forward to...
I'm stopping this for a second. So the fraud is widespread. In other words, it's all over the country. And if you point out fraud and somebody points their finger back at you and calls you a racist for pointing out the fraud, then you know immediately that they are in on it. I'm just saying. Anybody now calling racist, you use the word racist, then you are a fraudster. Just saying.
Today's hearing, and I thank the members and witnesses for taking part. Now yield back and recognize the ranking member, Ms. McBath, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for convening this hearing this morning to talk about the harm that fraud can cause. And thank you for everyone that is here this morning.
The fraud that harm that fraud can
that
cause.
We continue to investigate and
This ought to be
prosecute
great.
all forms of fraud, including government fraud, which can turn many into victims. That is because a person committing fraud against a government program steals from all of us as taxpayers and abuses the initial purpose of these programs.
Gee, you think?
They harm the organizations that need these programs to operate, and most importantly, they harm the people that the program is designed to help. Whether we're talking about a program that feeds school children, helps seniors find housing, helps people overcome addiction, or provide services to address disabilities, it is critical that the dollars that we invest in these programs actually serve the purposes that we have in mind when we, the lawmakers, created them. That's why the Department of Justice has always combated fraud, including prosecuting dozens of people for perpetrating fraudulent schemes in Minnesota in 2021 and under the Biden administration.
You know, I'm going to stop this here too on this woman because you can just see she doesn't have a nose ring in, which would really confirm who she is. However, all of the women behind her and her, you can tell they are not interested in rooting out fraud, and they don't even believe in fraud. They call it something else, maybe reparations. Just saying.
Prosecutions are not enough to combat or prevent fraud. So the Biden administration also established a COVID-19 fraud enforcement task force and increased
Biden
oversight of programs that were being targeted by fraudsters. Minnesota lawmakers have also taken steps to reduce fraud in their state, strengthening the state's ability.
Oh, I'm stopping this now. Again, if they have to tell you all the ways in which they've been fighting fraud, and we know that the fraud is worse than it's ever been, this woman is in on the fraud. Look at her hair. Look at the jewelry she's wearing. I wonder what kind of nails she has. I don't know. Everything about her, to me, screams fraud.
To stop potential fraud sooner and improving investigations to hold
Daniel,
those
you're a
accountable.
fraudster too.
President
Bye.
Trump has taken a very different approach to fraud. Just last week, Trump added a quite a few fraudsters to his growing list of people that he has pardoned.
Oh, now it's,
Not because they are deserving a second chance.
here's the other thing that the fraudsters do. When you catch them stealing, they turn around and point the finger at Trump and call him the fraudster. And that's how we know that you, lady, are a fraudster. More evidence, please.
But because they hired his friends, back-channeled a donation, or served his political
Look at the ladies behind
He's pardoned
her.
many people
This one looks
charged or
nervous.
convicted of fraud
Really
and
nervous.
other financial crimes, wiping away more than $1 billion in money that would otherwise have gone to victims of crime.
What's she up to?
President Trump has also fired inspectors general,
Yeah.
instructed his DOJ
President
to stop
Trump did
enforcing
it.
bribery statutes,
Sure.
and gutted the offices that investigate white-collar crime. That is how we know this hearing is not really about fraud. It is about trust.
Here we go. This hearing is not
Does
even
want
really
you
about
to
fraud.
trust these programs
Oh.
because if you don't trust them,
You're
they're
a
easier to
thief.
destroy them. They do not want you to trust entire communities because if you don't trust them, they're easier to intimidate.
Sure.
But we cannot let that happen.
Wow.
We will continue to fight for robust and responsible oversight and for the
Agreed,
continuation
Dominic.
of initiatives that make all of our communities safer, healthier, and more resilient. Across the country, there are daycares, schools, hospitals, treatment centers, research facilities, nursing homes, fire departments, police departments, airports,
The facts don't
and
lie.
more that all depend on state or federal funding.
I'm not going to
Not just
argue
to
with
help those in need, but
criminals.
to serve every single one of us. If President Trump succeeds in
That black
attempt to
woman looks
freeze
very,
childcare funding
very
across
concerned
5
about
states,
something. Look at her.
which is
What's she on
temporarily
about?
blocked by a court order, the effects would ripple
got an
across
issue.
families and businesses throughout our economy. It would affect more than 500,000 children. And these are children that are not just within the state of Minnesota.
Oh, those poor children that aren't
500,000
being
children,
served.
Their parents, the businesses and organizations where those parents work, and the many people who depend on those businesses to fulfill needs in those communities.
And Somalia.
That's the fallout from just one program addressing one need across only 5 states. If President Trump continues this assault on critical programs, the harms could be far
Then
greater.
you need to leave.
These latest attacks come on top of the cuts that President Trump and congressional Republicans already forced through, which are taking health care from 10 million Americans and reducing food assistance to over 40 million Americans, including many, many children. We don't have to choose between programs that are susceptible to fraud and nothing at all. With proper oversight, we can make sure that every American is fed,
Exactly,
that
Jen. X.
everyone can access housing and medical treatment, and that our daycares and our schools can keep guiding our children towards a better future.
Okay, just again, this woman is actually defending daycares that were not serving children. Daycares in crap hole neighborhoods that were not open in the daytime and were not daycares. That's what she's defending right now. This is unbelievable. Thank you, Ben. Where was the oversight? Why did that woman who looks just like the last press secretary for Biden, by the way, what's her name? Tiki? Really, Tiki? Tiki said that Leering Center had been closed. And then suddenly the Leering Center was open. And then suddenly the Leering Center was closed again. Come on, we've had enough of this crap. Okay, I can't listen to this woman anymore because she's lying out her teeth. And this woman really has to be held accountable for fraud. All these people they're all in on it. And this woman behind her with the dreadlocks, she is nervous and not feeling too well. Let's keep an eye on her throughout this hearing. Here we go.
I look forward to hearing more today about how
I
we
wanna
can
hear more,
achieve this
too.
goal. I thank our witnesses for being here, and I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan. No, I don't recognize him right now, but I will recognize the ranking member, of the full committee, Mr. Raskin, for his opening statement.
Oh, great,
Mr.
Raskin.
Chairman, thank you to all
Here's
of
some
our
more
witnesses for joining us.
deflections, some more
In a
lies.
just world, the Judiciary Committee today would be investigating why a masked ICE agent shot 3 times in cold blood and killed an unarmed citizen, a 37-year-old
Oh, but now we're
mom,
talking about
Renee
ICE.
Nicole
ICE is
Good.
bad. Okay, I
We'd be
will not put
investigating
you guys
why-
through listening to Jamie Raskin. This guy's a total nut job and a liar and a phony and probably in on the scams that you are about to
whose
see
job it is
uncovered
actually
by real
to root
people.
out waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption,
Sure,
and
Jamie,
left
sure.
28 IG offices without Senate-confirmed leadership at all, allowing the corruption and the fraud to run rampant. So if we're going to have a hearing about fraud in America, Mr. Chairman, let's do it. Let's take in the full scope of
Yeah,
what's taking
let's
place
do it,
in our country.
Raskin.
I yield
Come on.
back to you.
Yeah, let's
Gentleman
do
yields back.
it.
I now recognize the chairman of the entire committee, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I want to thank our witnesses for being here. Estimates are potentially as high as $9 billion we're looking at here, and what appears to be a decade-long scam, fraud. I mean, I always look at one program I talked about a couple weeks ago at an oversight hearing was this Feeding Our Future program, where taking Americans' hard-earned tax dollars, taking that money and supposedly providing meals to children. Problem was there were no meals and no kids. They're just stuffing it in their pockets. So I think this is a great hearing to have. We appreciate the witnesses and the work that they've done.
Oh,
Ms.
that guy
Larson and
needs
the
to
work
be
she does,
reported.
and actually
Everybody
making a
report
difference, doing a
Gabriel.
legitimate program. Mr. Shirley for uncovering this, and Mr. Dexter and others who are here. So with that, I would yield back and look forward to hearing from our witnesses in the hearing itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognize myself for just some UCs.
Report this guy,
The first one is
everybody.
President Joe Biden commutes sentences for 2 of Chicago area's most notorious fraudsters. North Dakota judge blasts Biden for setting fraudsters free. Biden commutes roughly 1,500 sentences, pardons 39 in biggest single-day act of clemency, including fraudsters. Illinois lawmakers furious after Biden commutes sentences
Yeah, he
of
does,
state
Jenna.
fraudsters. Without objection. And now,
Mr. Chairman, could I enter some as well?
yeah, please.
Thank you much. This UC request is from ABC News, January 20th.
Oh,
2026,
ABC
titled,
News,
"Trump's
let's
Pardons
trust them.
Give
Screw
Financial
you,
Crimes that came
Raskin.
with
Don't want to hear
Or
it.
affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God. Thank you. You may be seated. The record will reflect that the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. And at the instruction of Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, I wanted to let all members of the panel know that when you have a question for him, please say his name so he knows that you are addressing him, please. I want the witnesses to know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes, and we'll begin now with Mr. Dexter. You
Raskin
are
doesn't
recognized
put
for your
together
5 minutes.
facts, Juice. Everyone knows that.
Thank you. Chair, members of the community, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Here are where your
My
facts
name
come
is
from.
Scott Dexter. I'm a retired law enforcement investigator with 28 years of experience, most of it spent conducting criminal and financial fraud investigations, with experience in surveillance operations. In 2013, after retiring from law enforcement, I joined the Minnesota Department of Human Services as part of a newly created investigative unit within the Office of Inspector General. Our mission was straightforward: identify and investigate fraud within the Child Care Assistance Program known as CCAP. I was one of the original 4 investigators hired, all of us former law enforcement professionals with backgrounds in criminal investigations. Our cases were not selected based on the name of the center, the owner, or the community it served. They were selected based solely on tips, complaints, and the amount of CCAP funding being paid out. The highest funded centers were reviewed first, and many of those centers were referred to us through the public tip line or by licensing inspectors who observed activity inconsistent with a legitimate daycare operation. What we found was deeply concerning. Many of these centers operated out of commercial spaces with windows totally covered, no visible play areas, and very few children ever present. Through surveillance, data collection, and review of attendance and billing records, We repeatedly documented patterns of overbilling, non-existent attendance, and in some cases, children being signed in for hours they were never actually at the center.
Oh, another terrorist
Our
is here.
investigative process was thorough and methodical. We collected licensing and billing data, installed covert surveillance cameras, reviewed hours of video, identified parents and employees, and calculated estimated overpayments based on actual attendance. Completed cases were then turned over to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension for search warrants, interviews, arrests, and potential prosecution. As our investigations progressed, we noticed a trend. Many of the centers receiving the highest levels of CCAP funding were owned and operated by Somali individuals, and the families served were predominantly Somali. This was not the basis for selecting cases, but it did become the basis for accusations against us. We were labeled as racially biased, despite the fact that our case selection was driven entirely by funding data. An outside review was launched into our investigative practices. We were questioned about how we selected centers and how we conducted surveillance. Following that review, new restrictions were placed on our work, including mandatory panel reviews before we could move forward with investigations. Investigators were also pulled from conducting new or current investigations in order to enter data from all previous complaints received by DHS into a newly created database, a process that took nearly a year to complete. These changes significantly hindered our ability to do our jobs effectively. Ultimately, in 2019, I chose to retire because the investigative process had become so constrained that meaningful work was no longer possible. Through collaboration with federal agencies, including the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, Homeland Security, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, we learned that millions of dollars in cash from the Somali community was being flown out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport by Somali couriers. At one point, nearly $70 million had been documented leaving the country halfway through a single year. Although we could not prove that the cash was obtained fraudulently, we strongly suspected that it was. We also encountered situations where federal partners were prevented from opening cases due to concerns about political sensitivities surrounding the Somali community and the refugee resettlement program. These decisions had real consequences, allowing fraud to continue unchecked. Throughout our work, we identified several loopholes that made CCAP highly vulnerable.
Yeah, I gotta stop that quickly. Did he just say that they couldn't prove that those millions of dollars leaving Minnesota airports in suitcases, they couldn't prove they were fraudulently obtained from Somalians? You couldn't prove it? That's crazy. And then we've got this idiot here, Juice, who is maybe Somalian, if not Somalian, on the take or involved in some kind of a scam. Yeah, oh yeah, do your own research, Juice. We're watching, we're researching, believe me, we're all watching. Maybe you should do some research. Here we go. Yeah, we suspected, right, MT, right? What the actual? This is insane. I'm going to get rid of Juice for you guys. Anybody have an objection to that? We don't need idiots in the chat.
Centers were allowed to bill for the full authorized hours, even when children were present for only minutes. Billing records could be submitted up to 30 days later, creating opportunities for manipulation. Attendance records were handwritten, unreliable, and often incomplete. And despite our recommendations, no biometric attendance systems, no electronic submission requirements, and no state-installed security cameras were ever implemented. Chair and members, the purpose of my testimony is not to cast blame on any community.
Don't blame anyone.
It is to highlight systemic weaknesses that allowed large-scale fraud to occur and to emphasize...
Okay, I'm going to stop it here. I blame you. I blame you, Mr. Police Officer, who watched millions of dollars go out of our country in suitcases in the hands of Somalians. I blame you. I blame you with your suspicions, but you couldn't prove anything. Are you kidding me? I've never seen millions of dollars ever in my lifetime, and I'm not a criminal. Why do Somalians have millions of dollars in suitcases going to Somalia? What's wrong with you? I blame you. You are the first line of defense, and I blame you.
Need for stronger safeguards, better oversight, and investigative processes that are allowed to function without political interference. Thank you for your time and your commitment to ensuring accountability within publicly funded programs. And I am prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Oh, I have
Thank you,
questions.
Mr. Dexter. And now we're going to recognize
That's right,
Mr.
Katla.
Hetler-Gaudette for your 5 minutes of opening statement.
Chairman Biggs, Ranking Member McBath, and
Oh,
members
this
of the
ought to be
subcommittee.
good.
I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today on the important issues of preventing fraud and protecting taxpayer dollars. My name is Dylan Hetler-Gaudette, and I'm the Acting Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs at the Project on Government Oversight. We are a nonpartisan, independent watchdog that promotes a more accountable, transparent, and effective federal government. We view it as our mission to combat abuse of power and corruption in the federal government, which includes working on rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse.
You did a horrible job.
The unfortunate truth is that fraud in government programs is a fact of life.
Oh, a fact of life. I blame you. I blame you too. All these people I think we're going to see testifying here, they watched it, they saw it, they said, oh, now look at that. That seems wrong. And they let it happen. I blame you. I have a feeling that he's blind, MT. I have a feeling that he was hired as somebody who, a blind auditor. That's rich. Or maybe like Macron, his wife hit him in the face. No, I'm sorry, that's an eye infection. I don't know. Why is he wearing sunglasses? It's a really good question.
The United States government has existed.
Maybe it is meta.
Fraud in
Maybe it
government
is.
has also
Good one.
existed.
Good catch.
Or much longer than that, in fact. For as long as human beings have been organizing ourselves into societies and building institutions to govern those societies, there have always been those who will seek to take advantage.
I'm full of anger, Steve
This is a
Hansen,
harsh
not hate.
but
Anger.
real truth related to the human condition.
Okay, Steve Hansen thinks I'm full of hate. No. I'm full of love. I am full of love for the people in my country that I find out have been robbed horribly. How would you feel? I don't want to look at your face on this one. How do you feel about criminals walking into your home and literally robbing you blind on a daily basis? And you don't even know it, and you're like, I'm going to pay my taxes now. And you think that's just fine. And they take all these thousands of dollars and they literally give them to criminals who take the money out of our country. And I'm trying not to be upset about this because I know getting upset, it does not serve me well. I'm not full of hate. I'm full of anger. I realize that my countrymen have been treated so badly by the whole world and our so-called politicians who have led us down this horrible path and let people into our country who never had our best interests and then gave them all of our taxpayer dollars. And we were supposed to feel sorry for them and told us we were racist. You want to look at a woman of color? I'm a woman of color. I was raised Jewish in this country, and that was not easy for me. So I have faced racism and abuse and hatred my whole life. And you know what? I'm a stronger person for it. I learned how to stand up for myself. I learned how to tell people like you in the chat who are going to call me full of hate, when really it's you. You're the ones, all of you screaming at people like me for pointing out the abuse and the waste and the fraud. And these people that we now look at who pretended that they didn't see it happening, but now say that they did see it happening and they just didn't know what to do. And they tried to tell people about it and nobody answered them. And they were told to go away or lose their jobs. This is what you're about to find out. These people testifying right now before you, they sold you out because they didn't want to have problems and they didn't want to lose their jobs. Or maybe they even took some of the money. I don't know, but they're there, so I don't know. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, being told what to say through the glasses could well be. Who knows? He looks weird, doesn't he? When you see it and you think it, you might be right. Stop letting people call you names. Stop letting people tell you you're a racist when you say, please stop stealing from me and my mom and dad and my children. Americans can barely feed themselves. Our kids can't find places to live because of fraud, because of trillions of dollars stolen from people who are not American, and some people who are. And it starts with the politicians, and it starts with the people like that police officer we just heard from, and now this dude. And they're calling it systemic. It's not systemic. It's a crime. It's a crime. It's a crime. Did you see someone in the chat here earlier actually threatening my life? Why? What have I done? I'm here pointing it out. You think I'm evil? Really? Wow. I think what's going on here, this fraud, is evil. And if you don't like the truth, it might be because you are a criminal. Okay. Let's turn it around and listen to Mr. Glasses over here, see what he has to say. I have Jesus, believe me. Jesus is my very best friend. I know
into our fundamentally fallen and flawed natures.
I know who you are.
That said,
Call
it is
me
still
out.
incumbent upon every one of us to do what we can to prevent fraud and to hold perpetrators
right.
of fraud accountable. This is especially true when the fraud implicates hard-earned taxpayer dollars and critical public programs and services. This is true whether we're talking about fraud in the context of the Feeding Our Future program or any other program in Minnesota.
Thank you, Pocket.
Whether we're talking about welfare fraud in Mississippi, which involved the participation of a world-famous Hall of Fame NFL quarterback. This is true whether we're talking about fraud in the context of it being perpetrated by large multinational defense companies in the context of multi-billion-dollar contract they have with the Defense Department. The point here is that fraud and the abuse of taxpayer dollars is not related to any particular geographic, demographic, or other boundary or characteristic. So why do these things happen so much? Mostly they are caused by deep structural flaws, gaps, and weaknesses in our system of government.
Oh, deep
also driven by-
structural gaps and weaknesses in our government. Are you serious? Here, Mr. Whimsy says, because I was naked and you gave me clothing, I was hungry and you gave me food, I was a stranger and you gave me shelter. That's what we did. And then you turned around and you stole everything you could from us. Doesn't work that way. I do not believe that Jesus thinks this is the way to go. I love Jesus, okay? I was raised Jewish and I accepted Jesus. So say whatever you want about me. Jesus is my best friend.
Recalcitrance and resistance to change on the part of federal agencies. To put it shortly, fraud is a systemic problem and it requires systemic solutions. So what are these solutions? I'm pleased to share a few of them with you today.
Oh, please, so share
Let's
your
first
solutions.
look at watchdogs, critical sources of information, and practitioners of oversight from within the federal government itself. I'm specifically talking about inspectors general, the Government Accountability Office, and whistleblowers. Rather than attacking, firing, undermining, and intimidating these individuals and entities as this administration and its allies have done, we must strengthen, preserve, and protect them.
Exactly.
We must enact reforms to make sure that IGs and GAO can perform their duties effectively and independently. And we must add additional safeguards to make sure that whistleblowers can blow the whistle without fear of reprisal or retaliation. We must also take a long, hard look at the architecture currently in place for how we track, monitor, analyze, and assess federal funding. To put it bluntly, that architecture is broken. Key resources like USAspending.gov are in desperate need of overhaul and modernization. We need to enhance and improve the quantity, quality, timeliness, and integrity of the data and information we collect on federal funding.
No, we need to stop the fraud.
We need to promote more accountability, transparency, and compliance mechanisms within the chain of spending for federal funding. If we don't do this, we will never have a good grasp on where funding is going, where it's ending up, who is being helped by it, who is being missed by it, and what the ultimate impact is. Lastly, we must enact robust, reforms, and vigorous enforcement to crack down on corruption, cronyism, and conflicts of interest, which turbocharge
Did
waste,
that guy
fraud, and
just
abuse
pat
in the
him on
federal
the
government.
back?
The presidential
Wait a
pardon
minute.
is an acute example of this, with each of the last two administrations using whistleblowers. If we don't do this, we will never have a good grasp on where funding is going, where it's ending up, who is being helped by it, who is being missed by it, and what the ultimate impact is. Lastly, we must enact robust reforms and vigorous enforcement to crack down on corruption, cronyism, and conflicts of interest, which
that?
turbocharge waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. The presidential pardon is an acute example of this, with each of the last two administrations using the
I think those are
pardon power
AI meta
inappropriately
glasses.
to pardon convicted fraudsters.
He looks awful nervous,
We must
doesn't he?
also promote
With his
reforms
handler
to crack
behind
down on
him,
the revolving door
patting him on
between
the back.
agencies and industries, and to head off pay-to-play politics, all of which distort and corrupt decisions like the award of federal contracts. The takeaway here is simple. Focusing on individuals' salacious, scandalous examples of fraud is akin to looking at the symptoms and not looking at the disease or the root causes of the disease. The Project on Government Oversight stands ready, willing, and able to work with anyone here who wants to work on root causes and systemic solutions so that we can actually get our hands around waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption in the federal government. Thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hetler-Gaudette. And I forgot to mention, when you get about 10 seconds left, I'll just tip that so everybody will know that as well. So, Mr. Shirley, you're recognized for your opening statement.
Awesome.
Here we
I'm
go.
here today to
A real
speak
person.
on behalf of all hardworking, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens here inside of the United States. I've helped bring to light widespread fraud that's happening inside our nation, and we the people have had enough of our hard-earned money going towards fraudsters as if it's no big deal.
Amen.
As I speak here, I want to ask everyone a question. How much do we trust when we pay our taxes it's going to benefit our nation? People erupted during the Boston Tea Party over just a few percentages as they believed they were being taxed without representation. Nowadays, we have the representation, but do we trust our representatives? My name is Nick Shirley, and I made a 41-minute video that I posted on platforms like X and YouTube. My video received over 100 million views, and it created instant change within our government. As the federal government launched investigations in departments such as Health and Human Services froze over $185 million in child care funding until businesses can prove they are legitimate businesses. I actually became aware of the fraud that was happening in Minnesota in June of 2025 as I was there for a separate video, and Minnesotans started reaching out to me asking me if I was making a video on the fraud. I said, well, what fraud? And this lady, she was a real estate agent, and she says, well, I'm having a hard time selling my properties because people are curious about these assisted livings that are popping up next door to some of the houses that we're buying, or the home health care clinics that are popping up, and we don't know who's next to these houses that we're trying to sell. And I said, well, I'm not going to come and make a video if I don't have any proof. So therefore, I left Minnesota, and I continued to look for fraud in the best way I could. And as I was getting my own from the state of Minnesota as to how much money these places are receiving, I said, great, let me come to Minnesota and we'll make this video about potential fraud that was taking place inside of Minnesota. We go to a daycare, and I'm instantly surprised by what we see. We arrived, and it was an industrialized building, and there was 2 daycares registered at that building. And the first thing I noticed is all the windows are blacked out, and there's no footprints in the snow of any children. There's no playgrounds or anything that would make it look like it's a child care. But above me, a sign read, open 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. But there was nobody there. The doorbell did not even work. And then we continued to go to other daycares, and we noticed the same pattern. No children, blacked out windows, and one daycare, a learning center, spelled Quality Learning Center instead of Quality Learning Center. They had received $1.9 million, yet with that $1.9 million, they could not even spell Leering right on their sign. Governor Walz has said he's been fighting fraud in Minnesota since 2019 and said the buck stops with him. However, how long would it take for you to notice $1 million being leaving your bank account and not knowing where it's going. That's essentially what had been happening in Minnesota for years, as billions of dollars have been misplaced. And meanwhile, while people like Governor Tim Walz call people like me a white supremacist, delusional conspiracy theorist, he actually decided to drop out of re-election because I believe of how deep and extensive this fraud is. Thank you very much.
Clapping.
Since my reporting, the HHS department froze over $185 million, and to this day, not a single business has been able to prove proof of legitimacy. How fast would you be proving that you are a legitimate business if you have children to actually feed and to take care of? You'd be sending in that paperwork instantly. I made this video to document the widespread fraud that has been taking place, as I truly believe all fraud is bad. And people like me, my generation, we're sick of seeing tax dollars go towards fraud. We just want to have the same opportunities that our fathers and our grandparents had. And when you see people making millions of dollars by committing fraud, it upsets everybody from all age demographics. And so I hope today we can have a good conversation, and I think we can all agree that fraud is bad and that fraud is fraud. And I wish the best for our country, and I think that's what needs to be happening, is to crack down on all forms of fraud. So thank you for having me, and God bless the USA.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley.
Thank you,
And now I
Mr.
recognize
Shirley.
Ms. Larson for your 5-minute opening
He's
statement.
amazing.
Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today on this issue. My name is Jennifer Larson. I'm the founder and CEO of Holland Center in Minnesota. I've been an autism provider for over 20 years and started the organization for my son. I built Holland Center because families with children like mine were desperate for help, desperate for services and stability, desperate for somewhere they could trust their child would be supported and helped, not sent home on a bad day, not babysat in a classroom and forgotten. We serve the children that don't succeed in public school settings. What started as a small program grew over 2 decades into 4 locations that families rely on, not just for therapy, but for hope, routine, and survival. This work is a labor of love for me. Just like me, there are providers all over the state laboring with love to help these children. And this week, Holland and other programs all over Minnesota are collapsing. Not because we committed fraud, but because a crime ring was allowed to operate inside Minnesota's service system, and the government's clumsy response is now destroying legitimate, long-standing providers and devastating families that we serve. Families come to Holland, they do not have a backstop. Their children often receive 30 or more hours of therapy a week. These are not an extravagance, these are medically necessary. These children learn to communicate, regulate their emotions, reduce dangerous behaviors, and function in daily life. For many parents, therapy determines if they can work. Consistent staff and therapy prevents severe behaviors and regression. Structured care keeps children and their siblings safe. When services disappear, families do not just simply adjust. They face a crisis. For more than 2 decades, Holland has served hundreds of children year after year, employed hundreds of clinicians and staff, operated under yearly on-site audits, inspections, and documentation oversight.
Another one who
Delivered
should
real
be
services
charged
to
with
real
fraud. This
children
lady
every day.
is charged
We've
with
always complied with everything the
fraud.
system required. Yet, within the last month, the state has withheld over $400,000 in Medicaid funds for my own program, and that number grows every single day.
The FBI
I
watches
had to
this channel,
infuse
by
my
the
personal
way.
funds to survive these weeks, but can't do that any longer without payment. Let me be clear, we are a fee-for-service industry. When we can't pay our staff, we lose our staff and children lose care. Families do not lose appointments, they lose the people they trust.
Okay.
What happened in Minnesota had nothing to
What happened in Minnesota had nothing to do with what? Oh, I got to hear the rest of this.
do with the ethical, longstanding autism providers. What did happen was organized criminal networks that exploited autism
Call them
services by
bum.
opening fake centers, billing for children that did not exist, billing for services never delivered, and stealing millions of taxpayer dollars in the process. These are not minor compliance issues. They are criminal enterprises. Families trusted that the government was protecting the integrity of the system. It failed. Now, instead of doing the obvious thing and targeting criminal actors, the response has been to freeze everyone's payments. That decision does not punish the criminals. It punishes innocent children and families.
Okay, but what about the criminals? Why are there billions of dollars being spent on childcare when most of it is fraud? I mean, what children are actually being served by this? You know what? I'm an actual journalist. I've written 3 books. Well, I'm in the process of writing my 3rd book. I wrote for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette for 15 years. I'm an actual journalist, so you can question my credibility all you want. I'm allowed to say what I want. I don't have anybody sponsoring me, just myself. And I'm showing you guys how our country, the United States of America, has been taken advantage of by fraudsters. And the fraudsters actually start with people like this Ms. Larson sitting right here, trying to defend all of these child care places that are taking in money from taxpayers. You have to wonder about that right there. I never, ever got money from the government to take care of my own children. So I have to wonder why we are paying millions, no, billions of dollars out to take care of children. Where are their mothers?
As Medicaid payments are delayed due to prepayment review by an insurance company that is in the business of denying claims, providers are reducing hours, cutting staff, and starting to close. Families are scrambling for alternatives that don't exist. Children are regressing. Parents are leaving jobs to care for their disabled children. Autism therapy cannot be paused without consequences.
Oh my God, parents are leaving their jobs to take care of their disabled children. Why aren't they taking care of their disabled children anyway? Why are they at work instead of taking care of disabled children? That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think it's right to tell mothers to go out and make money instead of take care of their own children. As a journalist, I actually became a journalist so that I could take care of my children and not be out in the workplace. So I was a freelance journalist and I worked on my own time. That's how I
Loss of
raised
services can erase years of progress.
Yes,
in weeks,
I am a journalist,
An abrupt
Kyle.
disruption of services can cause lifelong consequences in these children. This is not abstract harm. It is daily trauma for families already carrying an extraordinary burden. The simple solution to the problem: send the criminals to jail and allow trusted providers with decades of clean audits, verified ownership structures to continue providing prescribed ethical therapy, and go back to paying them what we've earned and resume paying them on time. I built Holland for 20 years. Families built their lives around the care that we provide. All of that is risk of destruction today. Not by fraud, but by clumsy government response that failed to distinguish between criminals and caregivers. It treats children with disabilities.
The gentlelady will suspend. We've got a photographer there. We allow photographers in here, but not between the panel of the witnesses and the members. You will please move.
Okay.
Yes, they are
Photographer, please
Muslim,
move.
MC.
Like right now.
Yes, she's crying because she doesn't get money for fraud. That's why she's
the risk of
crying.
destruction.
Fake tears for sure, Jason,
Not by
you're right.
fraud, but the clumsy government response that fails to distinguish between criminals and caregivers. It treats children with disabilities as acceptable collateral damage. Fraud must be stopped and criminals prosecuted. I'm a taxpayer. I live in Minnesota. This is disgusting.
Oh, I'll bet those disabled kids whose parents were always at work are pretty happy that they don't have to be put in daycare so their parents are with them. I'll bet they're happy about that, FYI. Hi, Victoria.
Families and children should never pay the price for government failure.
No, Cosmo. That's Cosmo.
We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Besides the work Mr. Shirley has done, I want to recognize Powerline, who has done
That's right, Annie.
yeoman's work exposing
Taking
this over the
advantage of
last
you.
decade, what has happened. And I just want to say, Ms. Larson, I live in northern Wisconsin. There's an autism school that was started in my community. Where did we visit when we wanted to start that a decade ago? We came to Minnesota, where you have been leaders in having good autism programs. And I think about the tremendous fraud that has gone on in nutrition programs, housing programs, but is there anything more heinous than abusing an autism program?
Yes. Right.
I can't imagine. It's so hard to believe that people are faking that children have autism and stealing money from the government. When I'm sitting here with my 25-year-old non-speaker, and now children like my son aren't going to have services because they stole money from the government and faked these things. And it's just, it is, like I said, disgusting.
With what's going on right now, what are the families
Wow,
that you're
she
serving?
brought her
What are they
child.
saying?
They're scared.
What are they doing?
Yes.
Everybody's scared. There are centers that are, programs that
you
have already
kidding?
shut down. Staff are leaving. I, this week, asked my staff who will take unpaid leave because we can't keep going like this. I'm like I said, I'm 400,000 plus in debt now, and I'm not sure these are going to get paid back. I went to a bank and they wouldn't back the receivable because they said that's
I
not a
believe it,
receivable.
Annie.
If it's prepayment review, you may not get it.
And Ms. Larson, none of this would have happened if the fraud did not occur. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Mr. Dexter, could have something been done about this earlier?
Yes, as I stated in my testimony.
Okay, I'm gonna rework what we just saw there with that woman, bringing her child as a witness. So I guess she is the one showing that the fraudsters hurt her and her child, and that is the point. So now I'm thinking maybe her tears are actually real, and she is a mother who is $400,000 in debt while the Somalian daycares are walking into airports with millions of dollars in suitcases. And this woman is $400,000 in debt, and she is clearly an American woman and with her son there. So I'm going to rework that. She's not who I thought she was. And now I'm seeing that this woman was hurt. And you guys, we have the amazing Annie Zafiros on with us right now. She is truly an inspiration. And and I'm sorry, I'm calling attention to you, Annie, but Annie is disabled and is able to speak for other disabled people. So when Annie talks, I hope y'all listen to her and actually take her very seriously. She knows exactly what she's talking about. So Annie is the expert on my chat right now. It's not me, it's Annie. And if you don't care what Annie has to say, then you will get kicked off, because I want her to be given 100% respect. She deserves it.
Opening testimony, in the years that I worked there, we identified how fraud was occurring, the loopholes that existed, and we.
What were some of the warning signs, Mr. Dexter?
Well, the fact that part of our job was to go and collect attendance records. We would find attendance records that were either incomplete, non-existent. Obviously, there were times we found them to be fabricated because they were given to us way later, and the same with billing records. They were allowed 30 days after the end of the billing period to submit billing records, so they were not immediately available to us, and it kind of allowed overpayments or double payments to be overlooked. So we had the attendance record issue. We had the fact that there was no way to verify who was signing the children in and out. No way to verify what times those children were signed in and out.
Could I do a follow-up here? In Wisconsin, we learned this month that Ibrahima Diop, a Minneapolis school finance boss, placed on leave for failing to submit required financial paperwork with the Minneapolis School District and for signing questionable contracts linked to the Somali fraud scandal, was hired by the Milwaukee Public School System as a deputy superintendent at a salary of $240,000 a year. Do you think it wise? Might that be a warning sign that this person was involved, may have been involved with fraud in Minneapolis? Shouldn't they be concerned in Wisconsin that that they're hiring someone like that?
Well, if somebody that they hire has a past history and practice of doing that type of stuff, I would be very leery of it occurring again, or that being the basis that they're hired.
So Governor Evers refused to open the books and is blocking federal audits of our food stamp and Medicaid programs. And he also vetoed 4 auditor positions in a recent budget. Do you think that is also a warning sign?
Yes, if it's preventing,
Or ill-advised? Would that be a better way to pose the question?
yeah, if it prevents the oversight and the ability to audit and look at the records to make sure, can have a check and balance system, I think that'd be very unwise because, again, that allows fraud to occur.
Because, Mr. Shirley, what is happening in Minnesota, it could be happening throughout the United States. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
If there's one thing we've learned or leered, as they say in Minneapolis.
Leered.
Isn't it possible that this is happening everywhere?
Yes, I believe it is.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the ranking member of the whole committee, Mr. Raskin, for his 5 minutes of question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank all the witnesses for your excellent testimony. Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, the administration has systematically undermined government oversight. The president has fired more than a dozen inspectors general, not for any cause, but seemingly just in retaliation for doing their jobs and to block unwanted investigations. President Trump has defunded the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency. He's removed independent leadership at the Office of Special Counsel and Office of Government Ethics, blockading whistleblowers and numerous investigations. What is your assessment, Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, of the Trump administration's apparent systematic opposition to internal oversight mechanisms in the federal government?
Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin. My assessment is that the last year or so has been one of the most anti-oversight, anti-accountability periods that I've witnessed in our federal government. And I think the things you laid out, as well as others, are the sort of proof in the pudding there. And I think, speaking of things that should be giving us pause and raising red flags, that should all be giving us serious pause and raising serious red flags about how seriously people who claim to take oversight, accountability, fraud, how seriously do they actually take it?
Took his glasses off.
There's been a lot of attention given to Donald Trump's extraordinary use of the pardon
You're
power,
amongst friends, Forrest Longen.
as in the pardon of violent insurrectionists and cop beaters.
Ooh,
but
cop beaters.
There's also been a forgiveness of $1.5 billion in restitutionary fines that various people had to pay, and a lot of them are fraudsters. The DOJ
Like
in
you,
Trump's
Raskin.
first term brought bank fraud and tax evasion charges against reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley. They were convicted in 2022. They owed more than $22 million in restitution to taxpayers and to their victims. But then Trump suddenly, inexplicably pardoned them and forgave
All right,
all of
I've
the
had
money
enough for
that they were
Raskin.
supposed
I'm
to
sorry, I
be
will not
paying
force
back.
you guys to listen to Raskin. He is a fool, he's a buffoon, and he is a liar. Okay, let's move on.
Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dexter, let me make sure we got this.
We're back
we
with
got
Nick
this right.
Shirley.
You get tips and complaints,
Jim
whistleblowers
Jordan.
or others come to you and tell you
Looks like it,
something's not
Abner.
right at these child care centers in your state that are getting all kinds of taxpayer monies. Is that right? That's how it started?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you go and do your work. And you got 28 years experience investigating things, and specifically in the crime and financial fraud area. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you go out and find out these child care centers, there aren't any kids.
Just quick, we don't have to listen to everyone. If we listen to Raskin, he's going to call us all racist and lie about everything. I'm not listening to Raskin. I have no time for fools like him, and I have no time for you either. If you need to listen to Raskin, you go ahead and find another stream and you go listen to Raskin. We're not doing it here.
No kids are there. I mean, there's some, but there's like, you don't see the playgrounds. You don't see any kids at a place where they're supposed to be helping children. And then you also find out most of them are run by Somali individuals. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And then you make some recommendations. You said, here's what we should do. I think you put this on page 2 of your testimony. You said there's some basic things you should do. No, you said they didn't have biometric attendance system. They should do that. They should have electronic submission requirements. They need security cameras. You made some recommendations.
Yes.
And then what happened?
Nothing.
They ignored your recommendations, but it didn't stop there, did it? They ignored your recommendations. They called you a racist, right?
Correct.
Typical left. I always say the left will tell a lie. Big media will report it. You tell the truth, they call you a racist. Exactly what happened here. So they ignore your recommendations. They call you a racist, but it even got worse than that. If you can imagine. They started investigating you. Is that right?
Yes, we were interviewed by an outside firm for a report given to the Office of Legislative Auditor.
What did that report look like? What did they say? They call you a racist? What did the report say?
The report basically questioned our investigative tactics, looked at how our unit was managed.
Even though you had 28 years experience in this particular area, tips and whistleblowers came to you, even though that was the whole catalyst for doing this.
Your comments are awesome.
Okay, and the end result is what? The end result is Miss Larson, who's actually helping people, she suffers and the people she helps suffers. Is that right, Miss Larson? Not to mention the fact that taxpayers are getting ripped off, but the people who do good work, who actually help people, you suffer.
The disabled are paying for the money stolen.
Yeah. And why do you think all this is the case? So, I mean, all this brings me to seems to be a typical pattern, but in the end, you got to ask why. Why was, when you point out what's going on, you have good people doing good work who suffer, the taxpayers are getting ripped off, someone's got to ask, well, why did they not follow your recommendations, call you a racist, investigate you instead of just fixing the problem? Why'd they do that?
Yeah, why'd they do that?
Anyone want to hazard it? Mr. Shirley, you want to hazard
I want an
a guess?
answer.
Why that's the case?
Well, they simply use that as a deflection technique to make you not want to speak out against the fraud.
Yeah, it seems to me it's politics, though. You think it's politics, Mr. Dexter?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, the people at the top, like, well, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be called racist. In fact, we found that out a week ago in a hearing where we were looking at this Feeding Our Future program. We found out they actually shut that program off for a while. They said, time out, something's not right here. They found the same kind of things you found, Mr. Dexter. And they said, we're going to stop payment. And then it restarted. And the reason it restarted is because they threatened a racial discrimination lawsuit against the authorities there in Minnesota. So, okay, forget about the fact that when we do this, we restart the money, we're going to hurt good people like Miss Larson and the people she helps and rip off the taxpayers. We're going to do it all for politics. And we also found, interestingly enough, the Attorney General in Minnesota had a meeting with the key folks in this particular program, and then they find out a couple weeks later they start sending him campaign contributions. I think it's politics. I think it's politics driving it all.
I think it's
That's
crime.
why it's appropriate we're investigating here at the congressional level. That's why it's appropriate the Department of Justice has put in place a specific individual to focus on this, not only in Minnesota, but around the country. I talk too much. Anyone else want to throw on? I'll give you, Mr. Shirley, Ms. Larson, a chance to say anything if you want. If not, I'll yield 28 seconds to our chairman. I yield 20 seconds, remaining my time to the chairman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, would it surprise you that Joe Biden issued pardons to someone named Crundell, who had the largest municipal fraud in the country's history, and had a restitution amount of $53.7 million that was never paid following the commutation? Would that surprise you, sir?
That would not surprise me. And actually, in my written statement, I outlined how some pardons under the last administration, the Biden administration, they also fall into the same pattern of pardoning convicted fraudsters. So I'm in agreement with you there.
Yeah, thank you. And without objection, that time's expired, so without objection, Mr. Klein will be permitted to participate in today's hearing for the purpose of questioning the witness if a member yields him time for that purpose. And now we're going to go to Mr. Moore from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All this talk about pardons and the ultimate shyster, one of them was Hunter Biden. He got pardoned after Joe promised he wasn't going to do that on the way out. So anyway, that's another pardon for another day. Ms. Larson, I'm impressed with your son. I honestly thought he was your attorney when you guys were sitting there. But were there early warning signs, if acted on, that could have prevented the fraud schemes from growing to the scale that we see now?
I'd say yes. Looking back, this Somali community in Minnesota has a high prevalence of autism, and I know that because I serve a lot of minorities in my centers. So when these centers started popping up, I thought, good for them. You know, like I took care of my son. We have had a waiting list for 5 years, so I thought it was a positive. And then it just started to go and go, where now it's, 400 plus of these. And it started to, I didn't Nick Shirley it, that's a verb now. And go out and go see, because obviously I'm busy and that's not what I have time for. But, I think there were a lot of early warning signs. I think if anybody was actually paying attention.
They would have caught it.
Oh, 100%.
Because how long have you been in business? 20 years? Is
Over 20 years.
And you went through a number of audits, I think, every year, right?
Yeah,
every year.
The Americans
so how is it
follow
that these
the rules.
groups are getting away with it?
Yeah, how do they
and
get
you're
away
under
with
the
it?
thumb of the government auditing
Here's the
you
big
every
question
year.
right
why,
here.
Why do you think that is?
I either there's a double standard and they
Double
don't,
standard, yeah.
for whatever reason, have the same expectations that we do, or they're just looking.
Maybe Chairman Jordan was on.
Or they're on the take. Yeah, what's the reason? This right here, this is what they're talking about. The reason is there is a double standard, just like there's a double standard for Democrat politicians. They seem to have rules for thee and none for me. And this woman, this American woman with her son, has had to prove time and again that she's legitimate. But the Somalis get to have daycare centers with signs that are misprinted and wrong. And nobody looks. Because if they looked, they would know that they were frauds. So is it really just systemic problems? Or is it actual people getting wealthy off of a criminal conspiracy? That's what I think it is. I think this is a lot bigger than the word systemic that they like to use. It is not organized fraud. It is organized crime.
Mr. Shirley, now I guess investigative journalists are known as right-wing social media influencers. So can you confirm how many daycare centers you personally visited in Minnesota during your investigation?
During that first video, we went to around 7.
How did you select those facilities? I know you said earlier footprints in the snow, but how was it that you identified those facilities to go to initially?
So the man David in the video, he had the daycares with the CCAP funding, and we just simply drove around Minnesota and around Minneapolis area.
It took a lot of courage to do that, I would imagine. Probably more so now than what it was when you initially did it. 100 million views, you said.
Yes, over 140 million views on X alone.
So what was Mr. David's background? How did you connect with him, and how did he call you, or did you reach out?
He simply is just a man in Minnesota who has a passion for his city, and he's been seeing fraud taking place for years. And out of all the thousands of messages I get on Instagram and other platforms, I just happened to read his, and he provided me the information, so I gave him a phone call.
And then from there, just went to those different facilities. What was probably the most interesting thing as you were doing this? I think I saw the video. We watched it, and it looked like there was a number of facilities like in the same building.
Yes. So in one building, there was, I believe, 3 daycares, and there was no children. And they were all receiving CCAP funding for separate daycares. There's one daycare we went to that one day it was closed by the government, and then that same day it was reopened underneath another name. And they both received CCAP funding.
I bet, Ms. Larson, they probably weren't getting audited nearly like you were.
I would guess not.
So how many daycares are there in Minneapolis we think are fraudulent right now? Mr. Shirley, any idea? Or the amount of money total? You get any idea on that?
Well, they've frozen over $185 million, and not a single business has been able to prove that they're a legitimate business yet.
It's $185 million for sure that we know. Mr. Dexter, I got a question for you. What common patterns or warning signs usually indicate that the provider or the program may be committing fraud? As you were doing your investigations and 28 years of experience, what are some of the indicators that you see that maybe that should be a telltale sign or a red flag that there's fraud there?
Well, one of the immediate signs that we saw when we would go out to first look at the location is where that was located. A lot of times they were located in commercial areas, and I'm not talking like strip malls or anything like that. I'm talking about like industrial areas where you wouldn't typically find a child care center. We would notice that there was no play area, and if there was any play equipment, it was bare minimum. Now, there was an exception that if there was a playground area within a very short walking distance, that would count. But a lot of times we didn't see that. But the most glaring thing was that when we watched the centers, you know, we would sit and watch it for a couple of days before we even put up surveillance cameras. We would watch, and we would see little to no children present. If anything, there would be a few kids.
As you begin to blow the whistle, the investigator became
Gentleman's
investigator.
time has expired.
I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the ranking member, Ms. Bentgath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When he began his second term, President Trump broke from historic norms and fired 17 inspectors general, people who serve as critical watchdogs and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. A federal judge held that these firings were illegal, but also held that she could not reinstate these people due to their important roles. As a result, the president has been able to appoint acting
Not
inspectors
this one
general
again.
who have themselves been removed after informing Congress that Trump officials are not cooperating with investigations. Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, how do these frequent firings affect the ability of the Inspector General offices to prevent and investigate fraud?
I think they fundamentally undermine it, and they also create a real chilling effect for the inspectors general who are left. The incentive to do something that could upset the powers that be suddenly becomes a bit of a risky proposition. And so,
Again, he admits that it upsets the powers that be to call out the fraud. This is how it works.
between the completely undermining them and the chilling effect, you are really dampening and damaging the ability to do real oversight.
Thank you. And how does the politicization of Inspector General appointments affect the morale and effectiveness of career investigative staff there within these offices?
It also has a severely negative effect on morale and efficacy within the offices.
So I believe we can and should do more to prevent fraud and improve oversight so that all of our government efforts are doing the most that they can to help the American people. When the Judiciary Committee marked up the Republicans' partisan big ugly spending bill, I offered an amendment that would dedicate half of 1% of funding to be used for oversight and fraud improvement and prevention. My Republican colleagues, they opposed the amendment. Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, in your opening statement, you spoke on steps that Congress could take to ensure robust, nonpartisan oversight. The Project on Government Oversight recently published an article, 7 Ways Congress Should Sharpen Its Oversight in 2026.
Without objection.
Thank you, thank you. Is there anything else that you want to highlight from those recommendations?
Sure, yeah, I just want to pause to note that Congress really is the indispensable actor when it comes to doing oversight. There's supposed to be a somewhat adversarial relationship between the branches, and Congress is supposed to be the primary adversary when it comes to the other 2 branches and conducting oversight, but that is predicated on Congress taking that oversight duty seriously, irrespective of who is in charge of the other 2 branches. And so I think there's a political will issue there with oversight, but also there are some mechanical issues. So Congress could do a better job of holding hearings that are a bit more bipartisan, a bit more focused on the facts as opposed to the sizzle of a given anecdote or scandal. I mean, really trying to get at root causes and really trying to take hard, deep looks at the underlying structural reasons why things like fraud happen. It's not as sexy. It's not going to get you as many views on social media, but it's going to actually ideally lead to long-term, sustainable, durable reforms that can really crack down on the problem.
Thank you. And so the short-lived Doge office was supposed to cut fraud. Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, what did it actually do, and how did its actions actually affect everyday Americans?
So Doge was a complete failure.
She keeps calling him
Even on
Hitler.
its own terms, the primary progenitor of Doge claimed that he was going to find $2 trillion, then he moved that down to $1 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse, cut spending, but in 2025, we actually spent more money than we spent in 2024. At the opening of this fiscal year in October, we ran the largest opening month budget deficit ever run before at $285 billion. We have hollowed out the key functions of a bunch of agencies. Any claims that DOGE was effective either on cutting spending or promoting effectiveness or efficiency are just flat out undermined and undercut by the facts.
And Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, because you have done investigations yourself, did you do any follow-up on Mr. Shirley's video?
Yeah, look at her nails. I told you about the
So
nails.
personally, I
always the
took a look at
nails.
some of what had been done to try and backstop what Mr. Shirley indicated in his video by professional journalists at CBS and by professional oversight practitioners like the Inspector General in Minnesota. And as it turns out, they had a difficult time substantiating what Mr. Shirley was claiming to be true in his video. And in fact, they found countervailing evidence, including having been provided security footage by one of those daycares of children being dropped off the very day that Mr. Shirley was supposedly there. So I think in my view, I would have to, I think I'd err on the side of believing the professional journalists at CBS and the professional oversight practitioners at the Inspector General office.
Thank you. I'm out of time. I yield.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so on that note, I think it's important that we return to a discussion of how these investigations were conducted.
Costs a lot
and
of
the
money
type
to keep
of
nails
evidence
like that.
led to the...
By the way, for the person who thinks I'm pathetic in mentioning the nails, do you have any idea how much it costs to maintain those long spiky nails those women have? Look, I don't have even as much as, I don't get manicures. Very, very infrequently. I don't put any nail polish on my nails because I don't think it's good for me. Actually, about a year ago, a friend took me out and she said, let's do this gel nail polish. I'm not blaming her, by the way, but destroyed my nails. I'll never go back again. Anyway, it costs a lot of money to get your nails done like that. A lot of money. And you have to do it all the time, like every few weeks, because look at your own nail. They grow fast. So those women with those nails, they are spending hundreds of dollars on them. Just saying. And when they are in the government and there's like a congresswoman or something, you know, they don't just spend the money, they spend the time. The nails, the eyelashes. I don't do any of that. And some of you say that I look old. Well, I am old. I'm 60 years old and I'm proud of it. And I really don't care what you say about how I look, because this is how I look. And I'm not going to change it for you or anybody. I don't even need a filter on my phone because I just don't care. I am just me, unapologetically. You can love me or you can hate me, but I'm always going to look this way and I'm always going to just be myself. So for those of you who want to call me old, you go right ahead. I'm quite proud of it. Call me grandma. I'm going to be one soon. Super excited. So it's not so bad to get old, by the way. It's all good. All right, you guys, let's go back to this woman and hear what she has to say. Thank you. Thank you for you kind people. But you do have to look at the way people are, you know, and it tells you a lot. You have to use your discernment, as one of the people on here said. Use your discernment, look at people, and understand where they're coming from. This woman has some really beautiful nails, too. Yeah, do your own nails. Save a lot of money. Okay.
Discovery of this massive fraud. One thing that is clear based on the testimony today is that this is not just a Minnesota problem. This is a warning sign for every state that it is administering large-scale programs using taxpayer dollars. And we need to get to the bottom of how to identify this type of fraud and prevent it from continuing to occur. So, Mr. Dexter, I'd like to go back to your testimony, both what you have shared with us already about your extensive background investigating and analyzing program fraud, and the methods that you used to identify the theft of taxpayer dollars in this particular type of case. In your written testimony, you mentioned that case selection and investigations were begun in part by looking at funding data. And I am interested in how your office would use things like funding data, use statistics, and other information and evidence to begin to develop these cases.
Well, it wasn't hard to find the funding amounts. We looked at the centers that received CCAP funds, and then we listed them out. We had what was originally referred to as the top 100 list, and it was based off of centers receiving the most CCAP funding. And that was generated through the billing process and, the people that administer the funds.
And when you looked at that list, did it turn out that there were certain facilities that were outliers in some way, either because they were receiving a larger amount of funding based on student population than appeared typical, or because of where they were located? Tell us how you identified which facilities warranted further review.
Well, when we started looking at the centers that were receiving the most funds, the investigators were each assigned cases, were assigned centers, and we first started looking into what the billing pattern was, or what the billing amount was, how many children were being billed at these centers, and we would have centers that were billing for 120 plus children. And looking at the different days and times, kind of establishing a pattern that just was outside the realm of a typical daycare center.
So in other words, you used objective data and evidence as the foundation to proceed further with your investigations.
Yes, in order to start the investigation, that's what we would begin with.
And in your experience, wouldn't you also say that that is the typical method or atypical method for beginning and analyzing a potential fraud case of any nature in any community?
Yes, because in order to do the investigation, you first have to find out if it warrants an investigation and to what extent that investigation would be.
And now, isn't it also correct, you mentioned in your testimony systemic weaknesses that allowed the large-scale fraud, even after you had developed substantial evidence that there was in fact fraud occurring, that there were institutional and systemic barriers that prevented you from successfully moving these cases through prosecution. And indeed, in your testimony, you note that in 2019, you chose to retire because the process had become so constrained that meaningful work was no longer possible. Tell us about the barriers and ultimately that profound frustration that led you to retire.
Well, when we were originally hired, when this unit was originally created and we were hired with the understanding that our job was going to be to investigate fraud and stop it. And as we proceeded through with that, it wasn't by our doing that it turned out that the centers we investigated were predominantly Somali. But once that was kind of brought out to light, the roadblocks that were put in front of us, being called racist, being called before these boards to be investigated. And basically it wound up turning us into auditors. We wound up just simply reviewing attendance records and matching them up with billing. There really wasn't a lot of substantial investigation anymore, and most of our cases wound up going before administrative hearings rather than criminal.
Which in the end allowed this pattern of conduct to continue to occur, did it not?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Lady yields.
They don't want to blame anybody. This is what I'm hearing. They don't want to blame
To my
any
colleague
one
from Florida,
person.
thank you for that line of questioning. I'm going to pick up where she left off. In regard to the testimony that we've heard today,
Yes, Shirley.
the other side of the aisle makes us believe, or wants us to believe, that the fraud has been effectively stopped, that they aggressively pursued it, they prosecuted it, and that it is under control. Is that your interpretation of where we are, Mr. Dexter?
I believe the fraud is still going on. I don't think anything has changed from
Yep.
what I've seen with Mr. Shirley's videos. I'm seeing in his videos the exact same things that we were seeing back from 2014 to 2019 when I worked there.
It is astounding to me when I was looking at some of the footage, the evidence. There was almost a sense of, we are owed this money that we're stealing. How dare you investigate us? Did you ever
Bingo!
encounter that?
That right there. This guy's on the mark. Mr. Knott. I like him very much. He is telling it like it is. And this is the point. That these people act like they were owed this money. That's how they can sit there and blame President Trump and blame everybody around them and then say it was systemic and everybody's doing it, so we did it too. Like it's okay. Yeah. Thank you, Eric. Yeah. That's
Attitude when
that's
you
what I
were
hear.
performing these investigations?
There was an underlying attitude like that, that we were taking away their money
Yeah.
and that it wasn't fair to them.
In your investigation, sir, was the fraud as obvious as it seems to me that it
Of course it
appeared in
was.
the videos and the other evidence that I've reviewed?
Yes, as a matter of fact, when we would go out to do our investigations, one of the things that we would have to do, or I would have to do, is we would scout out a location for our surveillance cameras that allowed us direct line of
Not
sight.
one person,
to the
many
centers,
people
all
are
their
to blame.
accesses. A lot of that, because of the location where we were in these industrial, commercial areas, meant we had to go to businesses and
Democrat.
ask them permission. And the number one comment they made was, oh, you
God,
mean
it's
that daycare center over there where there's no children? So everyone else around it saw it.
In regards to your investigation, sir, I'm assuming that you did not just investigate daycare fraud. What other types of fraud did you investigate?
No, our function was strictly childcare fraud, but
Okay.
some of that overlapped into, even though we didn't investigate it, a lot of it was also tied into the medical transportation and.
Did you ever investigate single entities that were appearing as though they were committing fraud in multiple avenues?
I'm sorry, can you say?
So it was like, was there one facility that was a daycare? It was also associated with the medical transport. Were there people who were double dipping in the fraud in your investigations?
Yes.
Not that we saw as far as
We found out that yes.
organizations, but there were where one daycare center owner owned multiple daycare centers. So what we saw was more within the daycare center.
Yep. Ms. Larson, thank you for being here. I echo my colleague's sentiment from Alabama. Your son is very impressive. What's his name?
His name is Caden.
Caden, thank you for being here today. You look sharp. You're doing great. Let me just talk to you about these various audits that you were subjected to. How rigorous were they?
Very. They'd be there for hours, come in and say, I want to see these files for these kids at this date and this time.
Was there any way that you could have tricked them, concealed it? If you had not had any children there, would it have been possible?
Absolutely not.
In regards to the services that you've rendered, first, thank you.
Thank you.
And then in terms of the budgets that you require, how does it
Thank you,
make you
love.
feel when you hear firsthand accounts that hundreds of millions of dollars have been taken out of the country in suitcases to hostile nations?
I can't even respond the way I feel about that, but I will say it's still happening. To the questioning there's only 2 autism centers that have actually been shut down.
Yeah.
Of all of these that are going on.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is this prepayment review and putting us through this AI system at Optum to look for suspicious claims, which is why our funds are being held. And it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, it's not going to work. They just need to do what Nick did. Go and see that there's no kids there. Go and check it out.
And what Mr. Dexter did, data-driven review,
Yeah.
without any preconceptions, without any prejudices, and then holding the fraudsters to account. And when he did that, he was called a racist.
Yeah.
It's astounding. It is astounding. And you said that you helped many patients, diverse patients.
Yeah.
How have those patients been harmed by this administration in Minnesota, the Walz administration?
They are all being harmed if I shut down next week.
Is that what you're up
Yeah.
against?
Well, if I haven't gotten paid now, the last date of service was December 5th. I'm over $400,000 in debt. My payroll's $250,000 every 2 weeks, and we get paid every 2 weeks. So on Sunday night, I'll know if I get any money. I haven't been paid a dime. All my claims have been held. So I'm preparing to. And apparently in Minnesota too, I can't just pause services. If I pause my services, then the DHS can say, "I'm sorry, you've lost your license to serve the kids through this program." So I don't know what they think we're supposed to do.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for being here. I appreciate all the testimony. Sorry I didn't get to everybody else. There's a lot of questions. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields. I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Shirley, thank you for your testimony today and the work that you've done. Americans hear these numbers of the fraud that we have, and whether it's 10,000 or 10 million or 10 billion, sometimes the numbers, you almost become desensitized to it. And so the way that your video was able to show people the fraud sort of in real life actually happening, I think opened a lot of eyes and has helped to catalyze a level of scrutiny that we really should have had before. So you mentioned in your testimony that you think that what you discovered in Minnesota, that this is not isolated to that state, but likely exists in other parts of the country as well, correct?
Correct.
What makes you think that?
Well, now you're seeing, since I've posted that video, lots of other people have started to go to other locations For instance, in Ohio or in Maine or in California, they're also seeing the similar fraud take place in other daycares, for instance, in a lot of other locations.
Yeah, I have a particular interest in California, being from that state, and we know that there's been a lot of fraud. There was $32.6 billion that's been confirmed in unemployment insurance fraud. There's 1.2 million fraudulent community college applications. Have you gotten any sense, or have you seen any signs there that sort of are similar to what aroused your suspicions in Minnesota?
Yeah, and fraud in California might be worse than the fraud in Minnesota.
What makes you say that?
Well, $24 billion went missing for homelessness. They've been trying to build this train for years, yet there's hardly anything to prove for that. Fires.
Yeah, those are good points. So you look at let's run through a couple of those. Because I mentioned the areas where we have confirmed fraud, but then you also have these areas where you have so much spending, and then we look at what results from that spending, and there's nothing. So $24 billion in homelessness, and yet the homeless population went up, and a state audit found that they couldn't even figure out where the money went or what the outcomes linked to that spending were. Is that something that is kind of a red flag for you?
Yeah, it's a major red flag, and you don't even have to be smart to be able to know that that's a red flag.
Well, unfortunately, our state legislators haven't managed to figure that out, or at least the governor hasn't. So what are you saying about him?
They're not smart. No, but yeah, I mean, it's so obvious, and that's what we saw in Minnesota is how complicit the government has been in enabling this fraud to happen. Quality Learning Center had over 90 violations, yet they continue to give that daycare $1.9 million.
Yeah, that's a great point. That there's the political accountability just hasn't been there, and that's what enables it to continue.
Political
so then you
accountability.
mentioned the high-speed rail as well. So there has been about $18 billion spent so far. No track has been laid, and not a single passenger has ridden the train. So when you spend $18 billion on a train and there's no train, does that raise suspicions for you?
Yes.
So you think that might be something worth looking at?
For sure.
We also had a $650 million 911 service that they scrapped after 6 years, so absolutely no value from it. Maybe that's another example where there might at least be questions.
I think you got a lot in California.
All right, well, we'll look forward to seeing what you find. We're certainly trying to use whatever tools we have here to bring more accountability in California as well. Mr. Dexter, I wanted to also ask you a couple of questions about your work, because you have extensive experience on the law enforcement side trying to detect fraud. That's actually how in California we discovered the EDD fraud, the unemployment fraud, is it wasn't the state suddenly figuring it out. It was district attorneys who came together and investigated and in fact pointed to the fact that the state had let this happen and failed to heed their warnings and hadn't taken basic fraud detection steps. So is this something that you encounter? Like, what kind of internal controls make it so fraud is more difficult, and what type of lack of internal controls make it so fraud is easier?
I would say the biggest thing was the fact that when we tried to investigate this, once we started bringing cases forward and it showed that the number of centers that we investigated were Somali, the biggest roadblock was the fact that they didn't want to follow through on these cases. They shut down investigations. They made us, in light of the report from this outside management firm, we spent nearly a year pulled away from our investigations because one of the things they determined was that when our unit started, we didn't have a proper case management system for recording and keeping track of the tips. So as investigators, we instead had to spend nearly a year entering past complaints made to DHS into a newly created database. We couldn't do our investigations because of that. So they kept us from doing our work, basically.
Yeah. So the states that make fraud detection a priority have less fraud than those that actively contravene efforts like yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. Recognize the ranking member, Ms. McBeth, for some uses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article, Republicans' claims of fraud are a pretext for unpopular and drastic Medicaid cuts.
Without objection.
Thank you.
And so
Mr. Chairman, I have some.
You have a UC? Yeah, please go ahead.
Actually, forgive me, I have a handful of them here, Mr. Chairman. One is a letter dated October 21, 2025 from Representative Benny Thompson to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. regarding the decision to rescind the $101 million penalty imposed on Mississippi.
Okay,
press
we'll
release
not
dated
make you
September
guys
17,
listen to
2025,
Raskin, don't
titled Governor
worry.
Walz issues
Nobody
executive order
wants
directing
that.
And clemency. Also,
We don't
Minnesota
need to hear
daycare
lies and
expose.
subterfuge.
Journalist strikes again, and part 2 names the hub of the fraud wheel. 78th defendant charged in feeding our future fraud scheme from U.S. Attorney's Office, District of Minnesota. Suitcases filled with millions in cash flew out of MSP airport. Ex-TSA agent connects dots years later from Survival World. From the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS freezes child care and family assistance grants in 5 states for fraud concerns. From the U.S. Attorney's Office, District of Minnesota, 6 additional defendants charged. 1 defendant pleads guilty in ongoing fraud schemes. This is from the local Fox News in Minneapolis. Through the years, a decade of investigating fraud, Minnesota. U.S. Department of Homeland Security release. ICE continues arresting worst of the worst in sanctuary Minneapolis, including pedophiles, gang members, and drug traffickers. From MSN, TSA flags suspicious cash outflow at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. From MSN, foreign ATM, Somali cash exodus from Minneapolis exponentially larger than other major U.S. airports. From Breitbart, SBA cutting off grants to Minnesota over reports of Somali fraud. Vance praises YouTuber Nick Shirley reporting on Minnesota fraud. Waltz and Omar using ICE operations to distract from fraud scandal. And from Just the News, in Somali fraud scandal, Republicans probe evidence of a blue state election scheme. From the New York Post, ringleader of $250 million Minnesota welfare fraud scandal ordered by judge to forfeit Porsche and luxury goods. From LifeZet.com, TSA whistleblower, Somalis regularly flew out with suitcases stuffed with millions in cash. From Fox
And they
News,
let them do
Minnesota
it.
welfare fraud probe targets Somali Hawala money transfers. From the Star News Network, feds probe hundreds of millions in suspected Somali cash and luggage leaving Minneapolis Airport. From USCIS announces results of Operation Twin Shield, a large-scale immigration fraud investigation. From PBS, Nome says Homeland Security is investigating fraud in Minneapolis. From Cornell Law, this is the 18 U.S.C. Section 666, theft or bribery concerning programs receiving federal funds. Also, same source, 18 U.S.C. Section 641, public money, property, or records. Also, from same source, 18 U.S. Code 1001, statements or entries generally. And without objection, I now recognize myself for my 5 minutes of questioning. So, I have read all of your statements, and I do thank you, Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, for your recommendations. Mr. Dexter also had some recommendations. I think those are prescient. I think those are important. But I also have to bring some additional information out just because it's in my nature. I got to do it. So, Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, you've been talking about the IGs because you were asked about the IGs. Do you know how many cases, for instance, criminal cases are being investigated, say, by the Department of Homeland Security IG right now?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, no.
Would it surprise you if there were 650 ongoing cases with 200 of those being COVID related?
That would not surprise me, no.
And do you know how many audits they have going right now?
Nope.
They have 60 audits going right now with another 20 investigations going. That sounds to me like the IG there, at least in DHS, is not being chilled because of the appointment of temporary IGs. Am I wrong on that, or am I misconstruing that?
One thing about the DHS IG, Mr. Joseph Kafari, is he was actually appointed under the first Trump administration, and he has remained ever since. We actually at the Project on Government Oversight have long recommended that Mr. Kafari be fired because he has had a long and demonstrated track record of slow-walking investigations at DHS, particularly when it comes to abuse of force and other issues with DHS agents.
And yet the Oversight Committee for the IGs didn't adhere to that recommendation. So anyway, the point, I felt that point needed to be made. Additionally, Mr. Dexter, you looked at some of the same kind of physical evidence that Mr. Shirley looked at with regard to physical presence at the various daycare facilities that you were examining between 2014 and 2019. Is that true?
Yes.
And you saw basically the same kind of physical evidence that Mr. Shirley exposed.
That's correct.
You also looked at funding data, and you also had whistleblowers.
Yes.
And I find it interesting that somehow local news, which reported on the fraud, other local news reporters who reported on the fraud, credibly agree with the findings of Mr. Shirley. Is that what you have seen as well, Mr. Dexter?
Yes. Fox 9 News in Minneapolis, they followed a lot of our cases and did stories on them.
And so I mean, the very notion of trying to discredit Mr. Shirley because he got a lot of views, or that some CBS reporter disagreed and said they couldn't find the evidence, actually, in my mind, discredits the CBS reporter.
Thank you.
That's because, I mean, I appreciate the ranking member having cited the Arizona fraud, which I also constantly cite. It's a massive fraud in Arizona. Not just the $2.5 billion, but there's another additional allegation of about $7 billion per year fraud in Arizona. I think there needs to be a change there. I think we need to get a handle on this, not just in Minnesota, but nationwide. Because what we've seen in Ms. Larson's case, those who are conducting themselves according to the law, delivering services, are the ones that also get punished. But if you're a fraudster, somehow you're able to keep on going. And the fraud hasn't stopped. Mr. Shirley, have you seen any evidence? You said twice today that $185 million of recipients, not one of them has been able to demonstrate that they are
Remember
legitimate
Rumsfeld?
business.
No, in fact, they're actually actively suing the HHS to prevent handing over any information.
Right, so they don't even want to give the information that would be required of an audit, that would be required from a separate independent investigation. They want a court to intervene and enjoin and prevent them from having to respond to this kind of investigation. Is that correct, Mr. Shirley?
That is correct.
So, I mean, this is the thing, and I think, I'm listening to the panelists, I think everybody on the panel, I think everybody up here, we all want to stop the fraud. But the bottom line is, it's so infused with politicization that it is preventing us from just sitting down there and saying, okay, we got a symptom in Minnesota and we're going to fix it. I think the symptoms being exposed is critical because then it actually motivates people to try to get to the root cause. I'm out of time, and we have no other members here, so I just want to thank each one of you, from Mr. Dexter, Mr. Hetler-Gaudette, Mr. Shirley, and Ms. Larson, for being here and giving us your testimony. I really, really appreciate it, and I would encourage my colleagues to be better stewards and have better oversight, because otherwise, Mr. Shirley's generation is going to be paying through the wazoo, which
They already are.
right now means $40 trillion in national debt. So thank you all. Appreciate it. We are adjourned.
$40 trillion in national debt. Are you kidding me? Oh my God. Blah, 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 blah. What's going to be done? So, what did you all learn about that? I learned that there was a whole lot of nothing going on. I learned that people were watching the fraud happening, and they were finding out very quickly that if they talked about it or did anything about it, that they would lose their jobs. And these people were so concerned about their jobs and also not being called racist and like that, that they looked the other way. Yeah, they said something and good for them. And I'm glad that they're testifying now, but seriously. And then we have this woman who I initially didn't understand what was going on with her, but to find out that she runs a daycare, and her autistic son is being cared for in that daycare, and I guess some other kids, and that she gets the most rigorous oversight that you could ever imagine. She's literally got to open her books, tell them everything, every other week. She's being audited because of AI, apparently. So AI overlooks if you are not born in America, or I believe that these Somalians, this is the last 10 years that they've been doing this. And I am not blaming all Somalians. No, of course not. It's not all of them. It is just most of them. And they were brought here clearly for the fraud. Somalians didn't just appear in Minnesota just like magically there they were. They were bused, flown, whatever. They were transported to America's heartland on purpose by people who wanted to use them for fraud. That's what happened. So I don't think that we should blame the Somalians. We should definitely get them out of our country if they're found to have even signed a non-existent child up for daycare. You need to go. I know that there are some Somalians. I actually heard an interview with a Somalian man who came here and said that immediately, the minute that you step foot on American soil and you're from Somalia, that you have people who sign you up for Medicare, who put you on, whatever, housing, all that good stuff. That's what they do the minute they get here. And this man was like, no, I want to work. And they told him to stop. Kind of like when you work in the government and you start working really hard and fast, and the people around you are like, don't do that. You can't work hard and fast because you make the rest of us look bad. That's how our government is run. If you stand out, you got to go. You got to play that game. You got to be a loser like everybody else. If anybody shows that the system is rigged, they're the ones that suffer. I would never want to work in the government for that reason right there. Oh, these people thinking this is AI. Now, why would you think that I am AI at this point? Is it because I'm so gorgeous? Anyway, you're right, Shallon. And I haven't seen you before, so forgive me if you have been around, but I definitely noticed you today, Shallon, because you seem to have a very good head on your shoulders, and I'm glad you're here. And I hope that you have liked and subscribed. Yeah, $40 trillion in debt, blank slate. Another one I'm super glad to see here. I am a very real person, and I am old enough to have the wisdom to talk about these things, because I watched it all happen. We've all watched it happen. And I think it's quite a shame that our young people can't even afford to buy homes because they've all been scooped up by companies like BlackRock. But President Trump, thank God, is here to help us and save it. Did you hear that he is actually stopping BlackRock from buying any more homes? And do you realize the amount of fraud? It's just talk about systemic. It is literally in every part of our lives, including the food we eat. How about that inverted food pyramid that we've been lied to all these years? Even when I was a kid and I saw that we were supposed to be eating something like, 5 to 7 portions of carbohydrate-laden breads every day, I knew that couldn't be right. I was like, seriously? That's a good way to get very fat. Anyway, I never listened to any of it. I'm not a normal person, and I actually left this country in 1990 because of all of this nonsense. But I'm back. I've been back for a while now. I came back in 1999. And then I left again for a little while, and then I was back. So I go back and forth. Anyway, I know about how it is to be in a different country, to live in a different country, to be an immigrant. I've done it all. I've done it all. All right, you guys. Yes, BlackRock does actually buy family homes. You can look it up yourself, Jessica, and you can laugh at me if you want, but I'm telling you the truth. I don't have any reason to lie. And I am sponsored, though, by myself. JILLBOOKS, JillBooks.com. I'm a journalist, an author, and publisher. So you can check out my website. That's how I get sponsored. That's how, who sponsors me is just me. I'm just me. There's no big money, anything behind me. I tell you what I believe. And I am covering stories as a 60-year-old journalist who's kind of seen it all. So, no, you're not getting absolutely unbiased journalism. I don't think that's even possible these days. But you are getting real journalism when you watch the Beach Report. And I do cover stories that mean a lot to all of us. So, all right, you guys, I will see you on the next Beach Report. Today's been super busy. I don't know if I'll do another one today. Probably not. But I will see you tomorrow on the Beach Report. I got to go get something to eat. All right, you guys. Ciao for now. We'll see you on the next Beach Report. Please check out my website. Consider buying a book from me. Would be great. All right. See you.